Hey, everybody. Happy today. Nicole Morris here, the author of It's Not Me, It's You, the host of the Permission Slip podcast. And now we're going to think of a name for me. I am your official dropper of nuggets in this in-between series called Permission Granted. The purpose of the Permission Granted series is to have a deeper conversation about themes that are uncovered as you read the book. It's Not Me, It's You. And as we go through and experience life, I will be sharing on a series of topics that I personally experienced freedom from. The first of those topics, and the one that we're going to cover today, is called I Stopped Explaining Myself. By the end of this conversation, you hopefully will be able to relate to this. You will find it helpful. And then you will leave with a greater sense of permission to also stop explaining yourself. So let's talk a little bit about explaining myself and my habit of over explaining and where it came from. My habit of over explaining really was me wanting people to approve my decisions. It started probably when I was a kid, probably because I felt intimidated or scared in some spaces or was afraid to make a mistake, depending on some of the discipline that happened or people making fun from a number of scenarios. But in any event, nobody likes to be negatively critiqued. I definitely was not an exception, and you probably are not either. And so, in my seek to avoid negative critiques, I personally would just ask a lot of questions so that I could try to get ahead. And I also wanted people to be proud of me. I wanted people to know that I was smart and that I was thinking strategically and that I was ahead of the curve. I was always an overachiever, always very motivated. And so, how do you do that, right? I was trained at a very young age to seek validation outside of myself. I was a chaser of the good girls and attaboys, if you will. And that gave me validation. But what it also made me do, it also made me give the power away to other people to for me to determine when I was actually good enough. And so taking back my own validation and not feeling the need to get those pats on the back by oversharing or making people feel comfortable or trying to prevent some sort of fight or backlash or something like that from coming was one of the most freeing feelings that I have and I fiercely protect today. I no longer give away the power for somebody to define me or how I think or what I should do simply in their reactions to me. So it was also shaped by I really wanted to be understood. I felt like if people understood me, then they would also agree with me. And that's not actually what understanding is. Understanding, matter of fact, let me go and grab the Webster definition of understanding so we can kind of break this thing down a little bit. So, understanding, according to Merriam Webster, is a mental grasp or comprehension, usually with another person, mutual agreement, not formally entered into, but some degree of binding. It's friendly, it's harmonious, it feels good. And I used to mistake people being, people understanding me with people agreeing with me. And then, well, if you understood me and you agree with me, then you would like approve of my choices. And if you approved of my choices, then there was nothing for us to fight about. Honestly, if I'm being honest, like sometimes when I would do this, I was usually trying to get ahead of somebody else, right? Which is actually a form of manipulation. And we can get into that later in the series. There's a lot of this work where you not only have to go and look at other people and where their labels came from, but you also have to look at yourself and be honest about some of your motives. And that's when you can really come down and really find and have some peace with yourself and with how you move and really become a person that is not easily shaped or contorted by other people's opinions. Now, I always say this, I'll say this in every episode. I am not a therapist and I am not a coach. I am a person who has done an extensive amount of work on myself. I've been able to achieve things while I'm doing that and and am doing even more so after that. I share these stories from a place of human transparency because people sometimes they grow better when they see themselves in someone else. So as you decide to embark on this work or if you decide to embark on this personal work, please always have somebody professional walking alongside you because the most powerful thing that my coaches and therapists did and do to this day is they hold mirrors back up to me for me to understand when I need to be taking accountability for how I'm showing up or for how I'm not showing up or for how I have or have not dealt with something that's causing me to show up a certain way. So just always my note right there. Now going back to stop explaining yourself or even like some of the heaviness of explaining myself. It was exhausting. It was exhausting to me to always, because it felt like I was always putting myself in a pretzel, some sort of pretzel, right? And so if one person approved, if person A approved of the plan, let's say person A, B, and C, we all have to work together to get something done. Personal notes, right? Business is separate because you can get around that with agreements, but even then you have to establish relationships. But persons A, B, and C, we all have to work together to get something done. If I am isolating and triangulating my need to convince people by explaining myself, I should put myself in one position with person A that person B doesn't agree with, right? And all the while, I am always it's my position that's flexible, right? I'm always willing to negotiate, always willing to be malleable. And that was really expensive for me. It was exhausting to me because what happens when somebody changes their mind? What happens when somebody is as confused or flexible, air quotes, with their position as you are with yours? How do you make that decision? And how do you as a person ever get grounded? And so it was important for me to learn how to be okay with whatever decision I was making and why I was making it. It changed the entire contours of my conversation, my presence, my countenance. I went from walking into a room where I was always respected, but I could never kind of meet some of the people that I aspired to meet at the levels that I knew I was capable of meeting them at simply because I wanted their approval. And it's expensive, it's heavy. Over time, I began to realize, and especially after doing this work, how much of a price I was paying because I was always so malleable. And what I started to experience and actually respect, it was happening all the time, but I wasn't appreciating the impact that it had on me. And what I started to pay attention to was that people were not as careful with me as I was with them. I started to experience that when I would explain myself or explain my logic or explain my thinking, for some people, it was appreciative because they appreciated learning how I thought. And then for some people, it was almost like annoying because they're like, why are you telling me this? And some people, I just gave way too much information about myself. And it was almost like I was arming the enemy, right? I was arming people with information about me and how I thought. And they didn't have good intentions for me. They may not have always had bad intention. They may not have had no intention, but what they certainly didn't have was the positive intention for me that I had for them. And that put me into some precarious positions with people being able to manipulate me. And there was a moment when I realized that it wasn't required for people to respect my thought. And that was the moment when I decided that I respected my thought no matter what anybody else thought, right? No matter how anybody else reacted to it, I was okay with what I was saying. I knew that I was making the right decisions. I knew that I was doing the best thing that I could at the time with the information that I had. And most importantly, I, by always going outside of myself and explaining myself and seeking this understanding, I kept giving the power away to influence me. And that was a very painful place to be. And it was not a place that honored me. And it always left me subjected to people and their whims and what they needed from me. Hence, it's not me, it's you. Take their labels off. I was trained into letting people tell me who I was. And so when I decided to value my own critical thinking, when I decided to value that my no was a complete sentence, full stop, or my yes, or my thoughts, or my boundaries, they had to be respected because every time I flexed for someone, most of the time it cost me something. And when I came to look back many times, it was a price that I didn't want to pay. And I didn't realize until after it happened that I didn't have to pay it. So the moment I realized that it wasn't a requirement, like this deference that I was giving people by over explaining myself, it wasn't a requirement for me to respect myself. I just I had to respect myself. The same weight that I gave to other people's words, I had to give it to my own. That I gave to other people's thoughts, I had to give it to my own. And it's uncomfortable taking people through those kind of shifts with you because you go from being a person where they're used to good, bad, or indifferent. Most people don't wake up in the world and say, I'm going to go and do some damage today. That's not what most people are thinking. But what most people are thinking about is I'm going to get up and minimize the amount of pain that I experience. And if I get to minimize the amount of pain that I experience and I have to do it at your expense, then I'm okay with doing that because more likely than not, I'm only going to inflict a small amount of pain on you, right? And so that was my experience with people. People, for the most part, I definitely had some people though that woke up saying, "I'm finna do some damage to this young lady who was out here just leaving herself open to the world." I definitely had that experience, and that is very horrible. And one of the things I intentionally protect myself from today. But majority of the time, people are not waking up saying, I'm going to go and do some damage to somebody. And so what ends up happening though, as you begin to honor your voice and trust yourself to where you're not explaining yourself, you change how you interact with people. People don't have the same influence over you. Things change. That may be when you start getting some comments about who you think you are, or just some standoffishness, right? Maybe even some flat out manipulation, narcissistic, gaslighting type of things. Again, I'm not a therapist, so I'm not saying, but so validate your experiences with somebody who's a professional, but people, they need you in a place so that they can stay in their place. And whenever you rock the boat of their place, they do what they can to hold you in. There was a book that I once read called The Dream Giver by Bruce Wilkinson. I would recommend you go and pick that up, but he talks about border bullies. The premise of the story is about the character leaving their comfort zone. And when the character left their comfort zone, it made everybody else around them evaluate themselves. And because those characters didn't sign up to evaluate themselves in relation to the main character, they tried to do things to hold the main character in place, whether it was project their fears on them or outright attack them or make them doubt themselves, right? You will start to experience that, and it's very uncomfortable and it's very disappointing. It's very sad. It's very lonely. However, you leave those situations after you keep your power even more whole than you were when you went into them. And you have a better sense of peace from where to make decisions about yourself. You hold yourself accountable to yourself because you begin to look at yourself and say, I am signing up for this. I know this pattern. or let me tell on myself. I knew the pattern. The pattern even had an energy to it. I felt it. I felt it when I was attaching to somebody. In part of the book, It's Not Me, It's You, Take Their Labels Off, I talk about hitching my wagon to somebody else's star. And typically, whenever I try to attach myself to someone else's whatever it is, it ends up being expensive for me, somebody who's not like in my immediate circle. So valuing me has been one of the most freeing experiences that I've had because I no longer have to contort myself, and I'm okay with not having people around who my freedom and my peace within myself makes them uncomfortable. One of the things that I always say is if it comes down to a choice between me and you and I'm choosing, then I'm choosing me. And that's a unfamiliar spot for some people because sometimes I think martyrdom is celebrated. I don't know how many martyrs really get ahead on this side of heaven, for lack of a better way to say it. And I don't know that we actually have to have that life. That's a different conversation for a different day. But I will say this, I am lighter, not being concerned about what other people think. And I am able to care for myself more because I manage myself and I don't manage my concerns about their reactions to me. I sleep better, I plan better, I execute better, I deliver better on life. And all around, I'm just at more peace and I have more power. And I have more power over myself. And I don't have these negotiations over my identity anymore. We don't have to negotiate for who we are. And I want to encourage you to not do that too. You do not owe people the comfort of your decision with you, especially when they don't have to live in the consequences. For somebody who might have to live in the consequences, you want to have a conversation with them. But people who don't have to live in the consequences, who just are opining about things, you don't owe them the comfort of giving you approval. So here's your permission. Permission's granted. You don't have to explain yourself. Protect yourself. Keep your power. Until next time, for more information on the Labels Be Gone movement, what we're doing on the permission slip, and many of the other things that we're doing to have these transparent conversations that hopefully people find a sense of empowerment from when they listen to, you can find more about us at labelsbegone.com. You can pick up a copy of the book at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, any major outlet where books are sold. It is called It's Not Me, It's You, Take Their Labels Off by author Nicole Morris. Make sure you like, subscribe, download, give us feedback on the podcast. If you're listening on Apple Pods or somewhere else, make sure you give us feedback. Those things help us hit the algorithm and continue to make sure these conversations keep happening. So until next time, thank you all so much. Next up topic, next permission granted. See what we're going to do? We letting relationships in, y'all. Like, we not holding on to stuff no more simply because it's what we know or it's familiar. We're gonna let some things go, or we're gonna talk about how we let some things go. So until next time.